The silence began on a Tuesday. Not that the Galactic Council measured time in Earth's primitive cycles, but the irony was not lost on High Counselor Kale Veyron when his archivists later reconstructed the timeline. On a Tuesday, Earth's interstellar communication arrays went dark. Every beacon, every diplomatic channel, every casual signal that humanity had been broadcasting into the cosmos since their first stumbling steps into space, gone. Silent as a dead star. A malfunction, said Ambassador Threx of the Vorith Collective, waving 4 of his 7 limbs dismissively. These humans are still quite young as a species. Their technology fails constantly. Kale Veyron said nothing. He stood at the observation window of the Council spire on Ethon Prime, staring at the star chart where Earth's signal cluster had, until 48 hours ago, blazed like a warm coal. Now there was nothing. Not static. Not distortion. Nothing. Clean, deliberate, total silence. He had lived for 312 years. He had seen civilizations rise and collapse. He had watched the Dravac Imperium burn itself to extinction in a civil war that lasted 6 centuries. He had brokered peace between the silicon-based Murel and the carbon-based Sethani when both species had been convinced the other was a hallucination. He had never seen a spacefaring civilization simply stop talking. "Send a probe," he said quietly. The probe returned 11 days later, or rather, it didn't. Its last transmitted data burst showed it approaching the edge of what humanity called the soul exclusion boundary, a ring of navigational markers they had placed around their home system approximately 4 years ago. Politely. With full documentation submitted to the Council. Requesting, in the careful diplomatic language humans had learned to use, that the boundary be respected during a period of internal infrastructure development. The Council had found it charming. Quaint, even. Humans were always doing something with their infrastructure. The probe's final image before contact was lost showed the boundary markers glowing a deep, warning red. Then the feed cut. "They shot it down," said Fleet Admiral Marin Solix of the Delvari hegemony, her crest fanning wide with alarm. "The humans shot down a Council probe." "We don't know that," Kale Veyron said, though his voice carried less certainty than he would have liked. "What else explains?" "We don't know," he repeated. But they all felt it. The shift in the room's atmosphere. The subtle recalibration of assumptions. For 60 years, humanity had been the enthusiastic, slightly chaotic newcomers at the galactic table, trading aggressively, exploring recklessly, reproducing at rates that made older species nervous, and apologizing for cultural misunderstandings with such genuine sincerity that it was almost impossible to stay offended. They were loud. They were everywhere. They named their starships after oceans and mythological figures and, inexplicably, types of weather. And now they were silent. Kale Veyron called an emergency session. The debate lasted 9 days. Some council members argued for a diplomatic envoy. Others wanted a show of force, a patrol fleet to remind humanity of its junior status. The Murel delegates, who had always been quietly wary of human expansion rates, suggested the silence might be an opportunity to discuss boundary formalization. The Sethani delegates told them, with characteristic bluntness, that this was a cowardly way of saying something ugly. Kale Veyron listened to all of it. He slept very little. On the 10th day, the silence ended. Not with a diplomatic message. Not with an apology for the disrupted probe. Not with the cheerful, slightly too long transmissions humanity usually sent, full of cultural references that required 3 layers of translation to almost understand. It ended with a ship. Then 100 ships. Then 10,000. Then, over the course of 6 hours that Kale Veyron would later describe as the longest of his 312-year life, 100,000 vessels emerged from fold space at the edge of Council-monitored territory, arranged in a formation so precise it looked like mathematics made physical. The Galactic Council's early warning arrays screamed. The Council chamber fell absolutely, perfectly silent. The lead vessel was unlike anything in the human fleet registry, which the Council had, of course, been maintaining carefully. It was enormous. Not in the clumsy, overbuilt way of Vorath warships, which were large because Vorath engineers believed size was its own argument. This ship was large the way a mountain is large, purposefully, with nothing wasted, every surface speaking of function refined over years of deliberate, secret work. Its designation, transmitted in clean Council standard code, was UNHS Pale Blue Dot. Of course it was. The communication request came 3 minutes later. Kale Veyron accepted it himself, standing alone at the primary interface because he didn't trust his legs to carry him to his chair. The face that appeared on the display was human, male, older, with the kind of weathered stillness that Kale Veyron associated with people who had made decisions that cost them sleep and made them anyway. His uniform bore no decorative excess. His eyes were calm in the way that deep water is calm, not because nothing moves beneath it, but because whatever moves there is very, very large. "High Counselor Veyron," the man said. "My name is Admiral Ethan Cross. I command the 1st Unified Human Expeditionary Fleet." A pause, brief and deliberate. "All 100,000 vessels of it." Kale Veyron found his voice. "Admiral Cross." The Council was concerned by Earth's silence. "I know." Ethan Cross nodded once, acknowledging it without apology. "We needed the silence. We needed you to not know what we were building." "And what," Kale Veyron said carefully, "were you building?" "A guarantee," Cross said. 60 years ago, humanity joined the Galactic Council as a junior member. We came in good faith. We've traded in good faith, diplomated in good faith, and followed Council protocols in good faith." His eyes didn't waver. "We also paid attention. We watched what happened to the Dravac when they grew too large too fast and had no deterrent. We watched the Sethani nearly get absorbed by the Murel before they developed fleet parity. We watched the Vorath Collective expand its administrative zones into 3 systems that belonged to species who couldn't say no." Kale Veyron said nothing. "We're not here to threaten anyone," Cross continued, his voice carrying the flat authority of a man who had stopped needing to raise it. "We're not here to conquer. We're not here to demand a seat at a different table." A slight tilt of his head. "We like the table. We'd like to keep sitting at it. But we've decided we'd prefer to sit at it knowing that anyone who looks at Earth and sees an opportunity has already looked at this and reconsidered." He let that land. Kale Veyron looked at the fleet display, 100,000 ships, holding position with a discipline that made the finest Council fleets look like enthusiastic amateurs. He thought about 60 years of human trade agreements, always slightly more favorable to humanity than they appeared on first reading. He thought about human colony expansion, always just within treaty boundaries, always documented, always legal, but relentless as water finding cracks in stone. He thought about the 47 human languages that had no word for retreat that didn't also imply for now. He thought about a species that had looked at the galaxy, done the math quietly, and spent 20 years building 100,000 warships in secret, not to attack, but to ensure they never had to. "Admiral Cross," he said finally. "I think there are several Council members who are going to want to speak with you." "I expected that." For the first time, something shifted in Cross's expression, not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one. "We've prepared a diplomatic package. Full technical transparency on fleet capabilities, a proposed update to our Council membership terms, and a mutual defense framework we think several members will find attractive." He paused. "There's also an apology for the probe. That was overly aggressive. The operator who made that call has been counseled." Kale Veyron blinked. In 312 years, he was not certain he had ever heard a species simultaneously reveal a 100,000 ship fleet and apologize for destroying a single probe. "I'll arrange the sessions," he said. "Thank you, High Counselor." Cross inclined his head, the precise depth of a respectful equal, not a supplicant. "One more thing." "Yes?" We brought food. We understand council summits run long, and human catering has become somewhat popular at these events. The almost smile deepened slightly. We've got enough for everyone. Kale Veyron stared at the fleet that could, if it chose, rewrite the balance of galactic power before the day was out. Of course you did, he said. He closed the channel, turned to the stunned council chamber, and looked at 300 faces representing 40 species who had all, in this moment, arrived at the same understanding. Humanity hadn't gone silent because something was wrong. Humanity had gone silent because something was ready. And the most terrifying part, the part that would keep Kale Veyron awake for years, was that they'd remembered to bring lunch.